The ceramic plate trembled in my hands as my 4-year-old son Liam reached up, his tiny fingers brushing against the edge. I should have seen it coming, the way his curious brown eyes followed the dessert I was carrying, the way he stood on his tiptoes trying to get a better look. But I was too focused on balancing 3 other orders, too desperate to finish this shift without another mistake that would give Manager John another reason to yell at me. Then it happened. Crash. The sound of shattering porcelain echoed through the entire restaurant like a gunshot, and suddenly every conversation stopped. Every head turned toward us. Toward me, a worthless Omega waiter in a stained apron, and toward my son who was now clutching the fabric of my pants, his small body shaking with fear. Useless. Manager John's voice cut through the silence like a blade. His face turned crimson as he stormed toward us, his heavy footsteps making Liam flinch against my leg. What did I expect from an Omega like you? You're making this establishment look like a joke. This is the 3rd time this month. I dropped to my knees immediately, my hands scrambling to gather the broken pieces while simultaneously trying to shield Liam from the dozens of judgmental stares boring into us. The sharp edges of the plate bit into my palm, but I barely felt it. All I could focus on was keeping the tears at bay. Liam needed me to be strong, and I refused to let him see me break down in front of all these people. "I'm so sorry, sir," I whispered, my voice barely audible as I kept my head down. "It won't happen again. I'll pay for the plate." "Pay for it?" John laughed bitterly, loud enough for everyone to hear. "With what money? You can barely afford that pathetic apartment you're living in. I should fire you right now." The whispers started then, spreading through the dining area like wildfire. I could hear every single word, each one cutting deeper than the last. A single Omega with a child. Some alpha probably used him and threw him away. How shameless, bringing a kid to his workplace. Can't even get proper childcare. Look at him practically begging. No wonder he ended up alone. Each comment felt like a knife twisting in my chest. They didn't know anything about my life, about the nights I stayed awake, wondering how I'd afford Liam's next meal, about the sacrifices I made every single day just to give my son a chance at something better. They saw what they wanted to see, a failure, a burden, a cautionary tale about Omegas who couldn't keep their alphas. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the broken pieces. A drop of blood fell onto the white tile floor, and I realized I'd cut myself without even noticing. Liam's grip on my pants tightened, and I heard him sniffle. That small sound nearly destroyed me. "Don't cry, baby," I murmured to him, still not looking up. "Mama's okay. Everything's okay," but it wasn't okay. Nothing about this was okay. Just as Manager John opened his mouth to continue his tirade, a voice rang out across the restaurant. Deep, commanding, and absolutely furious. "Enough." The single word carried such authority that the entire room fell silent instantly. I felt the shift in the atmosphere, the way every alpha present seemed to recognize a superior predator in their midst. Slowly I lifted my head and followed everyone else's gaze toward the source of that powerful voice. A man stood near the entrance, and everything about him screamed wealth and power. His black suit was impeccably tailored, fitting his tall, muscular frame perfectly. Dark gray eyes surveyed the room with cold calculation, his jaw set in a hard line that promised consequences for whoever had earned his displeasure. His presence was so overwhelming that I swore the air itself seemed to still around him. Those steel gray eyes found mine, and for a moment I forgot how to breathe. There was something in his gaze, recognition, concern? I couldn't tell, but it made my heart race in a way that had nothing to do with fear. Then he turned his attention to Manager John, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. "You will apologize to your employee," the man said, his voice leaving no room for argument. Right now, Manager John's face went from red to white in an instant. "And Mr. Hale, I didn't realize you were, this Omega was—" I don't recall asking for excuses. The man, Mr. Hale, took a step forward, and John actually stumbled backward. "I gave you a direct order. Apologize to him. Immediately." The way he said it, with that undercurrent of alpha command woven through every syllable, made even me feel compelled to obey, and the order wasn't even directed at me. John's knees visibly trembled. His earlier bravado completely evaporated. I apologize," John stammered, though he couldn't quite bring himself to look at me while saying it. "Not good enough." Mr. Hale's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Look at him when you speak," Show some basic human decency. John's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard, finally forcing himself to meet my shocked gaze. I apologize for my behavior. It was unprofessional. I was too stunned to respond. This was Everett Hale, billionaire CEO, one of the most powerful alphas in the entire city. His company owned half the commercial real estate downtown, and his name alone could make or break businesses. I'd seen his face in newspapers and on television, always looking cold and untouchable, and he was defending me. A nobody. A struggling Omega waiter who couldn't even keep a plate from breaking. "You're fired," Everett said to John, his tone final and absolute. "Clean out your office. Security will escort you out." John's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, but one look at Everett's expression told him that arguing would be futile. He turned and practically fled toward the back of the restaurant, and I heard the whispers starting up again, this time filled with shock and speculation about what had just happened. Everett Hale turned his full attention back to me, and I found myself unable to look away from those intense gray eyes. He started walking toward where I still knelt on the floor, his expensive shoes clicking against the tile with each measured step. I should have stood up. I should have thanked him and grabbed Liam and gotten out of there before I could embarrass myself further. But I was frozen, my mind struggling to process the fact that this powerful man had just upended my entire workplace dynamic for someone he'd never even met. When he stopped in front of me and I saw him beginning to crouch down to my level, my heart nearly stopped beating entirely. What was happening? Why was Everett Hale, of all people, looking at me like I was something precious instead of pathetic? Manager John disappeared through the staff door, and the silence in the restaurant felt suffocating as Everett Hale knelt down in front of me. My pulse thundered in my ears so loudly that I was certain he could hear it. I was still on the floor, surrounded by broken ceramic and my own humiliation, and this man, this impossibly powerful alpha, was lowering himself to my level as if it was the most natural thing in the world. His scent hit me then, a wave of cedarwood and rain that seemed to wrap around my senses and demand attention. My Omega instincts responded immediately, trying to lean toward that comforting smell, but I forced myself to stay still. I couldn't afford to make this situation even more awkward by acting like some starry-eyed teenager encountering their first alpha crush. "You're hurt." His voice had lost all its earlier coldness, replaced by something gentler that I didn't quite know how to interpret. He gestured toward my hand, where blood was now dripping steadily from a cut on my palm. "Let me see." "I'm fine," I insisted automatically, even though my hand was throbbing. "Really, you don't need, Jesse." My name on his lips stopped me mid-sentence, my breath catching in my throat. How did he know my name? I hadn't introduced myself, and I certainly didn't think someone like Everett Hale would have any reason to know who I was. The confusion must have shown on my face, because something that might have been amusement flickered in his eyes. "Your name tag," he explained, though something in his expression told me that wasn't the whole truth. I glanced down and saw that yes, my name tag was still pinned to my apron, though it was crooked and partially hidden by the stains from tonight's dinner service. It was a reasonable explanation, but it didn't explain the way he'd said my name, like he'd been waiting to say it, like it meant something to him. "We need to get that cut looked at properly," Everett continued, rising to his full height and extending his hand toward me. "I'm taking you to the hospital." "No, that's really not necessary." I started gathering the last of the broken pieces, trying to ignore how my hand was shaking. "It's just a small cut. I can handle it myself. I've dealt with worse before, Jesse." There it was again, my name in that voice that seemed to resonate through my entire body. "Please, let me help you." I looked up at him, ready to refuse again, when I saw the expression on his face. There was determination there, yes, but also something that looked almost like worry. It didn't make any sense. We were strangers. He had no reason to care whether I was hurt or not. Before I could formulate another protest, I felt a small tug on my pants and remembered that Liam was still pressed against my side, silent and scared. I'd been so focused on Everett that I'd almost forgotten my son was witnessing all of this. Everett's gaze shifted to Liam, and his entire expression softened in a way that made my chest ache. He crouched down again, this time at eye level with my son. "Hey there," he said gently. "What's your name?" Liam pressed closer to me, shy as always around strangers, but after a moment he whispered, "Lee, that's a strong name." Everett smiled, and it transformed his whole face from intimidating to almost kind. I'm Everett. I'm sorry if I scared you earlier when I was talking to that mean man. But you know what? You can't yell at your dad anymore. I made sure of that. To my absolute shock, Liam's grip on my pants loosened slightly, and he peered up at Everett with cautious curiosity. My son never warmed up to people this quickly. It usually took him weeks to feel comfortable around anyone new. A trait I suspected came from having watched me struggle and stress for most of his young life. Your hand is bleeding, Liam said to me, his voice small and worried. Does it hurt? Just a little, sweetheart, I assured him, though the throbbing was getting harder to ignore. Don't worry about it. I have a really good doctor, Everett told Liam seriously, as if they were discussing important business. She's super nice and she has these cool bandages with cartoon characters on them. Want to come with us to see her? She can fix your dad's hand right up. I opened my mouth to refuse one more time, but Liam looked up at me with those big brown eyes and asked, "Can we go, Mama? Please?" And just like that, my resistance crumbled. I could refuse help for myself all day long. I'd been doing it for years, but when Liam looked at me like that, I couldn't deny him anything. Okay, I heard myself say, "We'll go." Everett stood up smoothly and offered his hand again. This time, I took it, letting him pull me to my feet. His hand was warm and steady, his grip firm but careful, as if he was aware of my injury and didn't want to cause me more pain. When I was standing, he didn't immediately let go, and I found myself staring at our joined hands for a moment too long. "I can walk on my own," I said quietly, gently extracting my hand from his. "I know you can," Everett replied, and there was something in his tone that suggested he understood exactly why I needed that small assertion of independence. "But I'm still going to walk with you." He turned to survey the restaurant, where everyone was still frozen in various states of shock and fascination. "Someone clean up this mess," he ordered, his commanding voice returning. "And get this establishment's owner on the phone. We need to discuss appropriate treatment of employees." Then to my surprise, he bent down and scooped Liam up into his arms. My son made a small sound of surprise but didn't protest, instead automatically wrapping his small arms around Everett's neck. "He's tired," Everett said, as if this explained everything. "I'll carry him to the car." I wanted to protest, wanted to take my son back and carry him myself like I always did, but the truth was that I was exhausted too. My hand was starting to hurt in earnest, my head was spinning from everything that had happened, and the idea of not having to manage everything by myself for once was almost unbearably tempting. So instead, I just nodded and followed as Everett walked toward the exit, Liam secure in his arms. Behind us, I could hear the whispers starting up again, speculation about who Everett Hale was to me and why he would involve himself in the problems of a nobody Omega waiter. I didn't have answers to any of those questions. All I knew was that something had shifted in the last 10 minutes. Something fundamental that I didn't fully understand yet. As we stepped out into the cool night air, Everett glanced back at me, and in the streetlight I could see his expression clearly. There was protectiveness there, and determination, and something else I couldn't quite name. "Everything's going to be okay now," he said, and despite all logic and reason, I found myself wanting to believe him. The hospital's private room was nothing like the overcrowded emergency department I'd visited with Liam last year when he had a fever. Everything here was quiet, pristine, and expensive. Soft lighting cast a warm glow over comfortable furniture that looked more suited to a high-end hotel than a medical facility. Liam had fallen asleep on a plush couch almost immediately, buried under a blanket that Everett had somehow produced along with a teddy bear that my son now clutched tightly. I sat in a chair by the window, watching Everett's long fingers work carefully to wrap a bandage around my palm. The doctor had already cleaned and treated the cut, declaring it shallow enough that stitches weren't necessary, but Everett had insisted on finishing the bandaging himself. His touch was impossibly gentle. Each movement was precise and measured, as if he was handling something fragile and valuable. I couldn't reconcile this tender care with the ruthless businessman I'd read about in articles, the alpha who reportedly dismantled companies and destroyed careers without hesitation. "You didn't have to do all this," I said softly, breaking the comfortable silence between us. My voice came out shakier than I intended. The private room, the doctor, any of it, I could have just gone to urgent care. Everett's eyes flicked up to meet mine, and the intensity in them made my breath catch. "You could have," he agreed, his thumb brushing lightly over the finished bandage. But you deserve better than urgent care at midnight with a scared child. You don't even know me. The words came out as barely more than a whisper. Why are you being so kind? He was quiet for a long moment, his hands still cradling mine even though the bandaging was complete. Then he leaned back in his chair and removed his suit jacket, draping it over the armrest. With his sleeves rolled up and his tie loosened, he looked less like an intimidating CEO and more like a regular person, though the powerful build of his arms and the authority in his posture still marked him as unmistakably alpha. What if I told you that I do know you? Everett said finally, his voice low and serious. What would you say to that? My heart skipped a beat. I'd say that's impossible. We've never met before tonight, haven't we? He leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees, bringing us closer together. Think back 4 years, Jesse. A rainy night on Highway 47. There was an accident. The memory slammed into me with unexpected force. Rain. Twisted metal. The smell of gasoline and blood. I'd been driving home from a late shift, visibility almost zero through the downpour, when I'd seen the wreckage. A black car had hydroplaned and rolled multiple times before coming to rest upside down in a ditch. I'd pulled over without thinking, my omega instincts screaming at me to help even though every logical part of my brain said to call emergency services and wait. But the car had been smoking, and I'd smelled fuel and the driver had been unconscious and trapped. I'd managed to break a window and drag him out just before the vehicle caught fire. I'd stayed with him, keeping pressure on his wounds, until the ambulance arrived. Then I'd slipped away before anyone could ask too many questions, because I'd been 3 months pregnant and terrified and in no state to deal with police reports or media attention. That was you, I breathed, staring at Everett with new understanding. You were the driver. He nodded slowly. I was unconscious for the extraction in and out during the ambulance ride. But I remember your voice telling me to stay awake. I remember your hands keeping me grounded when everything hurt. I remember your scent, honey and vanilla. And I remember thinking that if this was the last thing I experienced, at least it was something beautiful. My throat felt tight. I'd spent so many nights wondering if that alpha had survived, if my desperate attempt to help had been enough. But I'd been too afraid to check, too wrapped up in my own crisis as my pregnancy progressed and Liam's father made it clear he wanted nothing to do with us. I spent a week in the hospital recovering. Everett continued. When I finally woke up properly and asked about the person who saved me, the paramedics said you'd disappeared before they could get your information. All I had was a first name that someone at the scene thought they heard, and the memory of your scent. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights below. I searched for you, Jesse. I hired investigators, checked hospital records, followed every lead no matter how thin. But you'd moved, changed jobs, seemingly vanished. I was starting to think I'd never find you. Why? The question burst out of me before I could stop it. Why would you search for me at all? I just did what anyone would do. Everett turned back to face me, and the raw emotion in his expression made my chest ache. Because you didn't just save my life that night. You showed me that there was still kindness in the world. Us people who would risk themselves for a stranger. You asked for nothing in return, expected no reward. Do you know how rare that is in my world? I shook my head, unable to form words. In my position, everyone wants something, he said quietly. Every interaction is transactional. Every relationship has an angle. But you pulled me from a burning car and stayed with me and disappeared like some kind of guardian angel. I needed to find you again. Needed to thank you properly. He trailed off, but something in his eyes completed the sentence in a way that made my skin flush with heat. Then tonight I was meeting business partners at that restaurant. Everett continued. I saw the commotion, saw that manager berating someone, and I was going to ignore it like I usually do. But then I caught your scent across the room and I knew, even after 4 years, even mixed with fear and exhaustion, I recognized it immediately. I couldn't process this. It was too much, too overwhelming. That's why you helped me. Because I helped you once. No? He crossed back to me in 2 long strides, kneeling down in front of my chair so we were eye to eye. I helped you because watching someone treat you that way made me furious. I helped you because you were hurt and scared and that beautiful little boy was terrified. I helped you because the moment I saw you again, everything I'd been feeling for 4 years suddenly made sense. His hand came up to cup my cheek, and I found myself leaning into the touch, despite all my instincts warning me to be careful. I'm not letting you go this time, Jesse. I know that probably sounds insane, and I know you have every reason to be wary of alphas making promises, but I mean it. I'm not walking away. Tears blurred my vision. I don't understand why you'd want anything to do with me. I'm nothing special. Just a struggling single parent who can't even keep a job at a second-rate restaurant. You're everything special, Everett said firmly. You're strong enough to pull someone from a wreck and brave enough to raise a child alone. You're caring enough to shield your son from cruelty and selfless enough to put his needs above your own. And when I look at you, Jesse, I don't see someone struggling. I see someone surviving against odds that would have broken most people. A tear escaped down my cheek, and his thumb gently wiped it away. Let me be here for you, he whispered. Both of you, not because you need rescuing. You've proven you can handle anything life throws at you, but because everyone deserves support, and I want to be yours. The next 3 days felt like living in a dream I was afraid to wake up from. When I returned to my tiny apartment from the hospital that first night, exhausted and emotionally drained, I thought that would be the end of it. Everett had been kind, had helped us when we desperately needed it, and now life would go back to normal. Except nothing went back to normal. The next morning, I opened my apartment door to find grocery bags lined up neatly on my doorstep. Not just any groceries. Fresh organic fruits, vegetables still dewy from the market, high-quality proteins, and several sags of toys for Liam that must have cost more than I made in a week. Tucked between the bags was a simple note written in elegant handwriting. You both deserve proper nutrition. Take care of yourselves. My chest tightened as I stared at those bags, at the evidence of someone actually thinking about our well-being. Nobody had ever done something like this for me. Not my family who'd turned their backs when I got pregnant. Not Liam's father who'd called me a burden. Not anyone. I stood there in my doorway for a full minute, trying not to cry over groceries like some emotional mess. The second day, I was preparing to walk Liam to his preschool when I heard a car horn outside. Through the window I saw Everett's sleek black vehicle parked at the curb, and the man himself leaning against it with 2 coffee cups in his hands. What are you doing here? I asked as I stepped outside with Liam, trying to ignore how my heart had immediately started racing at the sight of him. Taking you both to school, he said simply, offering me one of the coffees, and then to your work. You don't have to do that. We're used to walking, and the bus stop isn't far. Jesse. The way he said my name, soft but firm, made my arguments die on my tongue. Please. Allow me to do this. There was something in his eyes, a quiet determination mixed with what almost looked like need, that made it impossible to refuse. So I found myself settling Liam into the back seat while Everett made sure the booster seat he'd apparently installed was properly secured. That became our new routine. Every morning Everett would be there waiting to drive us. Every evening he'd be parked outside the restaurant when my shift ended, ready to take us home. My coworkers started whispering, speculating about who this powerful alpha was and what he wanted with me. I could see the jealousy in some of their eyes, the confusion in others, but Everett never seemed to care about the attention or the gossip. He was just there, constant and unwavering. On the third day he invited me to his penthouse, and I almost said no. The whole situation was becoming overwhelming. This powerful alpha who'd been searching for me for 4 years, who'd knelt in front of me without hesitation, who now wanted me in his life. It was too much. I was just a broken omega, a single parent who'd been surviving day by day with nothing to offer someone like him. Mama. Uncle is really nice, Liam said as he played with one of the new toy cars Everett had given him. His innocent brown eyes looked up at me with complete trust. He told me a story yesterday about a brave knight, and he bought me ice cream with sprinkles. I ran my fingers through my son's soft hair and managed a small smile. For Liam, maybe I could take this risk. Maybe I could let someone in, just this once. When I arrived at Everett's penthouse that evening, I was struck by how different it was from what I'd expected. Yes, it was luxurious floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, expensive furniture, artwork that probably cost more than I'd earn in a lifetime. But it also felt lived in. There were books scattered on the coffee table, a laptop left open on the kitchen counter, shoes kicked off by the door. Everett answered the door himself, and I had to suppress a laugh. Instead of his usual immaculate suits, He wore jeans and a simple t-shirt with the sleeves pushed up to his elbows, and his hands were dusted with flour. "Are you cooking?" I asked, unable to hide my surprise. He ran a hand through his hair, leaving a small white streak in the dark strands, and gave me a sheepish smile that completely transformed his usually serious face. Attempting to cook would be more accurate. I wanted to make pancakes for Liam, but the first batch didn't turn out quite right. Something in my chest constricted painfully. No alpha had ever tried to do something like this for my son. The men I'd known had barely acknowledged Liam's existence, let alone attempted to cook his favorite breakfast food. I followed him into the kitchen and saw the evidence of his efforts. The table was set with fresh fruit, juice in plastic cups with cartoon characters on them, and 2 plates of pancakes, one batch clearly burnt around the edges, and another that looked perfectly golden and fluffy. "You made 2 batches?" I asked softly. "The first one was a learning experience," Everett admitted, moving to pull out a chair for me. "I'm better at corporate negotiations than cooking, apparently, but I wanted them to be right." "Why are you doing all this?" The question burst out before I could stop it. Vulnerability bleeding into every word. The groceries, the rides, the cooking. Why? Everett set down the spatula he'd been holding and turned to face me, fully. Then he crossed the kitchen in 3 long strides and reached up to cup my cheek with his warm palm. The touch sent electricity racing, touched my entire body. "Because you deserve it, Jesse," he said quietly, his thumb tracing along my cheekbone in a gesture so tender it made my eyes burn with unshed tears. "You and Liam both deserve to have someone who cares about you, who wants to make your lives easier, who thinks about what would make you smile, and I want to be that person." A tear escaped down my cheek before I could stop it. "I don't understand. I'm not special. I'm just—" "You're incredible," he interrupted, his other hand coming up to frame my face. "You're strong and selfless, and you've built a beautiful life for your son despite every obstacle thrown at you. When I look at you, I don't see someone broken or lacking. I see someone who deserves the world, and I want the chance to give it to you." More tears fell, but these weren't tears of pain or sadness. For the first time in longer than I could remember, someone was looking at me like I was enough, not despite my circumstances, but as a whole person worthy of care and respect. "I'm scared," I whispered, the confession falling from my lips unbidden. "What if this is too good to be true? What if—" "Then we'll figure it out together," Everett said firmly. "I'm not going anywhere, Jesse. I searched for you for 4 years. Now that I've found you, I'm not letting go." Behind us, Liam called out excitedly about finding a new toy in the living room, and the moment broke. But as Everett's hands slowly dropped from my face and he smiled at my son's enthusiasm, I felt something shift inside me. Maybe, just maybe, I could trust this. Trust him. Trust that we deserved this happiness. The following week passed in a blur of moments that felt almost too perfect to be real. Everett became a fixture in our daily lives, but it happened so naturally that I barely noticed the transition until it was complete. He picked us up every morning, and Liam started calling him Uncle Ev, with the casual affection that it made my heart ache. I could see how much Everett loved it, the way his entire expression would soften whenever Liam said it, the way he'd ruffle my son's hair with genuine fondness. My coworkers at the restaurant continued their whispered speculation, but I'd stopped caring. Let them wonder. For the first time in years, I had something good in my life, and I wasn't going to let gossip ruin it. But with the happiness came fear. The kind of deep, gnawing anxiety that kept me awake at night wondering when it would all fall apart. Because good things didn't last. Not for people like me. Every night after Liam fell asleep, I'd lie there thinking about all the ways Everett might realize I wasn't worth the effort. What happened when he truly saw how damaged I was, how many scars my past had left, how little I had to offer someone of his status. Today we were at the park because Liam had begged to play on the swings, and I couldn't deny him anything when he looked at me with those bright, hopeful eyes. Everett had suggested we make an afternoon of it, and now we walked along the path while Liam ran ahead toward the playground, his laughter echoing across the open space. Everett's hand found mine, our fingers intertwining in a way that felt both thrilling and terrifying. His palm was warm and steady against mine, grounding me even as my thoughts spiraled. "You're overthinking again," Everett said, glancing at me with knowing eyes. "I can see it in your face. You get this little crease right here when you're worried about something. He reached up with his free hand to smooth the spot between my eyebrows, and I felt my cheeks heat at the intimate gesture. "I'm just thinking," I deflected weakly. "About what?" He stopped walking and turned to face me, both hands now resting on my arms in a way that made it impossible to look away from him. The words stuck in my throat. How could I explain this constant fear without sounding pathetic, without revealing just how broken I really was inside? "Talk to me, Jesse," Everett encouraged gently. "Whatever it is, you can tell me. I'm afraid you'll leave." The confession tumbled out in barely more than a whisper, so quiet I wasn't sure he'd heard me. "Everyone leaves eventually. Once they realize what a mess I am, once they see that I have nothing to give them, they walk away. And I'm terrified that when you figure that out about me—" "Stop." Everett's hand came up to grip my chin, tilting my face up until I had no choice but to meet his intense gray eyes. "Listen to me very carefully. I am not leaving. I don't care how many times you've been abandoned before. I don't care what doubts are running through your head right now. I'm staying right here, with you, with Liam. This is my choice, and I'm not changing my mind." His voice held such conviction that I wanted desperately to believe him. "But what if—" "No what ifs," he said firmly. "I've spent 4 years searching for you. Do you really think I'd give up now after just a few weeks? Do you think I'd invest this much time and energy into something I wasn't absolutely certain about?" My lips trembled as I struggled to hold back the emotion threatening to overwhelm me. Nobody had ever spoken to me like this with such certainty, such unwavering commitment. "I see you, Jesse," Everett continued, his voice dropping lower, more intimate. "The real you, the strong, resilient person who pulls strangers from burning cars and raises an amazing kid despite impossible odds. The person who tries so hard to be brave, even when you're terrified. That's who I see, and that's who I'm choosing to stay with." The space between us seemed to shrink, and I suddenly became aware of how close we were standing. His scent surrounded me, that intoxicating combination of cedar wood and rain that made my omega instincts sing with recognition and want. His eyes dropped to my lips, and I felt my breath catch. Was he going to— "Mama, Uncle Ev, look how high I'm swinging." Liam's excited shout shattered the moment, and I jerked backward, my face flaming with heat. Everett chuckled softly, the sound rich and warm, and squeezed my hand before turning to wave at my son. "That's amazing, buddy," he called back, genuine enthusiasm in his voice. But then he leaned down, his lips brushing against my ear as he whispered. That single word, heavy with promise and heat, sent shivers racing down my spine. I couldn't form a response, couldn't do anything but nod slightly and try to remember how to breathe normally. We spent the next hour at the playground, Everett pushing Liam on the swings and helping him across the monkey bars while I sat on a bench and watched. It was such a domestic scene, so normal and perfect that it hurt. This was what I'd always wanted for Liam, a father figure who actually cared, who showed up, who made him laugh like Everett was doing now. As the sun started to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, we walked back to Everett's car. Liam was tired, leaning against my leg as we moved slowly across the parking lot. "Can Uncle Ev come have dinner with us?" Liam asked, looking up at me with pleading eyes. Before I could answer, Everett knelt down to Liam's level. "How about you both come have dinner at my place instead? I promise I won't try to cook this time. We'll order your favorite pizza." "With extra cheese?" Liam asked hopefully. "With as much cheese as you want," Everett confirmed, tapping Liam's nose playfully. I should have said no. Should have maintained some boundaries, some distance to protect my heart from the inevitable hurt. But looking at my son's excited expression and Everett's hopeful smile, I found I couldn't deny either of them. "Okay," I agreed softly. "Pizza sounds perfect." As we drove toward Everett's penthouse, Liam chattering excitedly in the back seat about his day, I felt Everett's hand find mine again. He didn't say anything, just held on, and somehow that day gesture said more than words ever could. I was falling for him, despite every warning my brain was screaming, despite every past hurt telling me to run. I was falling hard and fast for Everett Hale, and the terrifying part was that I didn't want to stop. Everything shattered the next morning when I opened my apartment door and found Jonah standing outside. I just finished getting Liam ready for preschool, my son happily wearing the new backpack Everett had bought him, when I heard the knock. Expecting it to be a delivery or maybe one of my elderly neighbors, I am the door without checking. The sight of Jonas, tall, blonde, and wearing an expensive suit that screamed success made my blood run cold. This was the alpha who'd gotten me pregnant and then disappeared, who'd told me I was making a mistake keeping the baby, who'd made it clear that an omega like me would never be good enough for someone like him. Jesse. He said my name with false warmth, as if we were old friends reconnecting instead of what we really were. A painful mistake and the person who'd abandoned us. You're looking well. I immediately moved to block the doorway, keeping Liam behind me. What do you want, Jonas? Can't I visit, check in on how you're doing? His smile didn't reach his eyes. I heard through some mutual acquaintances that you were working at that restaurant downtown. I wanted to see if the rumors were true. The rumors about what? I asked coldly, my hand gripping the doorframe so tightly my knuckles turned white. About my son. Jonas's expression shifted, becoming more serious. I've made mistakes, Jesse. Big ones. Walking away from you and Liam was the worst decision of my life. And I wanted to it right. Behind me, I heard Liam ask quietly, Mama, who is that? The sound of my son's voice seemed to catch Jonas's attention and he tried to look past me into the apartment. Liam? Don't. I cut him off sharply, stepping fully into the doorway to block his view. Don't you dare try to talk to him. You gave up that right 4 years ago when you told me to get rid of him. Jonas had the audacity to look hurt. I was young and scared. I've grown up since then. I have a stable career now. A good income. I can provide for him properly. Give him the education and opportunities you can't. The words hit like physical blows because they echoed every insecurity I'd ever had. Every night I'd lain awake worrying about whether I was enough for Liam, whether I could give him what he deserved on a waiter's salary. He doesn't need you, I said, but my voice shook slightly. We're doing fine on our own. Are you? Jonas raised an eyebrow, looking pointedly at my worn clothing in the shabby apartment building behind me. Be realistic, Jesse. You're struggling. I can see it, but I'm offering you a solution. Let me be part of Liam's life. Let me help support him financially. It's the right thing to do. The right thing would have been not abandoning us in the first place. I shot back, anger giving me strength. You don't get to waltz back into our lives now because it's convenient for you. Jonas's expression hardened, the fake concern dropping away to reveal something colder underneath. I was hoping we could handle this amicably, but if you're going to be difficult, I should inform you that I've already spoken with a lawyer. As Liam's biological father, I have rights. My stomach dropped. Rights? You're not even on his birth certificate. You wanted nothing to do with him. That can be easily proven with a paternity test, Jonas said smoothly. And when it is, any judge will see that a successful alpha can provide better for his son than a struggling single omega working minimum MAME. They'll grant me custody, Jesse, shared at minimum, but my lawyer thinks I have a strong case for full custody given your circumstances. The world tilted around me. He was right, the courts were notoriously biased against single omega parents, especially when a wealthy alpha parent came forward. I'd heard horror stories of omegas losing their children simply because they couldn't provide the same material advantages. You can't do this, I whispered, terror clawing at my throat. Please, Jonas. He's my whole world. You can't take him from me. Then let's work together, Jonas suggested, but there was triumph in his eyes. He knew he had the upper hand. Let me into his life voluntarily and we can avoid the messiness of court. My hands were shaking so badly I had to press them against the doorframe to steady myself. Behind me I could hear Liam playing with his toys, oblivious to the fact that his entire world was about to be torn apart. If he has a stable two-parent household to go to, that changes things. The new voice came from behind me, deep and commanding and wonderfully familiar. I spun around to see Everett climbing the stairs to my floor, his expression thunderous as he took in the scene. Everett, I breathed, relief flooding through me at his presence. He came to stand beside me and immediately I felt safer. His hand found my waist, pulling me close to his side in a possessive gesture that made Jonas's eyes narrow. And who are you? Jonas demanded, though I could see uncertainty creeping into his expression. Everett Hale, Everett said calmly, but there was steel beneath the words. I'm sure you've heard of me. Jonas's face went pale. Of course he'd heard of Everett Hale. Everyone in the business world had. Jesse and Liam are under my protection now, Everett continued, his voice dropping into that alpha command tone that made it clear he would tolerate no argument. If you pursue this custody case, Jonas, I'll make it my personal mission to ensure you regret it. I have resources, connections, and lawyers that will make yours look like amateurs. Is that really a fight you want to pick? You can't threaten me, Jonas blustered. But he'd already taken a step back. I'm not threatening you. I'm promising you. Everett's gray eyes were cold as ice. Walk away now and we'll forget this conversation happened. Keep pushing and you'll discover exactly how much damage I can do to your career and reputation. Jonas looked between us, clearly calculating his options. Finally, he straightened his suit jacket with shaking hands. This isn't over, he muttered, but it sounded like an empty threat. Yes, it is, Everett said quietly. Leave. Now. I watched Jonas retreat down the stairs, his expensive shoes clicking against the concrete until he disappeared from sight. Only when I heard his car start and drive away did I allow myself to breathe again. Jesse. Everett turned me to face him, his hands gentle on my shoulders. Are you all right? You called yourself my protection, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You said Liam and I were under your protection. I meant it. His gray eyes met mine with absolute certainty. But I want to make it official. Jesse, marry me.